Well, have you ever seen one of those car dealer commercials that says anyone can buy a car here? Then you look at the fine print at the bottom of the screen, or you show up because you say, I'm an anyone, I can buy a car. So you show up to buy a car, and you find out you don't qualify. There was some fine print there that said anyone, but then on the bottom it says anyone that meets these certain criteria. You have to have perfect credit. You have to, whatever. Or maybe you tried to get a special deal on a cell phone that you saw in a commercial. The commercial claimed the new deal was for everyone. And then you found out, no, that's only for those who have never had service with us before. If you're an existing customer, you can't have that deal. Doesn't that frustrate you? I get those things in the mail about a special deal with a company that I'm already dealing with. I go, I want that deal. That's better than what I'm paying now. And then I call them up, well, no, you're an existing customer. You can't do it. The only way you can get that deal is if you quit having service with us for 2 years, and then maybe you'll requalify as a new customer or something. That just frustrates me. It seems that whenever people say anyone is welcome or anyone can cash in on this deal, they don't really mean anyone. There's always a catch. In Luke 9:23, Jesus said anyone, or the NIV said whoever, anyone who wants to be my disciple. When Jesus says anyone, he means anyone. Anyone can be his disciple. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever, anyone who believes in him should not perish. Jesus has an open invitation for anyone to be his disciple. There is a slight catch, but he doesn't put it in small print. You don't have to wait until later to figure it out. You don't have to read. He puts the catch right there. The only catch is, if you want to be his disciple, you must be willing to deny yourself and take up your cross. The only requirement for following Jesus is, I want Jesus, and he's going to be number one in my life. I'm going to give everything to him. But I can be a part of his family. I can be a disciple. I am an anybody. As long as I'm willing to give it all for Jesus, I can be a disciple. Over the years, many people have heard the word anyone or anybody, or Jesus says anybody, whosoever. They've heard those words and they've thought to themselves, yeah, right. What's the catch? Certainly can't mean me. Anybody else, but not me. But Jesus has no hidden fees. It's all laid out right in that verse. I think this is one of the areas that the church has failed in. In an effort to get more people, we've watered down some of the hard things that Jesus said. We talk about all of the perks or benefits to following Jesus, but we don't mention that there will be sacrifice involved. Jesus promises us a great life. And we talk about that great life. If you come to Jesus, all your problems are going to go away. If you come to Jesus, your finances are going to just turn around overnight. And if you come to Jesus, you're going to get a better job, and your car's not going to break down anymore, and God's just going to... We talk about all the benefits of following Jesus. But we fail to say, you know what, there is a slight catch. Because it's not just accepting Jesus and then he becomes your personal genie and he takes care of everything. When you follow Jesus, you follow Jesus. You give him control of your life. Jesus promises us a great life. But there are things that we will need to be willing to give up in order to have that great life that he wants to give us. We want to just add Jesus to what we already have. We simply want Jesus to bless the things that we're already doing and anything that we might decide to do in the future. You know what? I've got my plans, and if I invite Jesus to be part of my plans, then it's going to go well. That's not what Jesus said. He said, you come follow me, be part of my plans, and if you become part of my plans, then you will be blessed. Jesus says, give up your agenda and your priorities and join me in my agenda and my priorities. If you follow me, I will provide everything you need and I will bless you. But the blessings I give you might not look anything like the blessings you think you're going to get, because I know what you really need. Jesus promises that anyone can follow. When he says anyone, he means anyone. There's a catch, but it's not hidden. Jesus laid it all out with his invitation. And when he said anyone, the crowds would have looked at his disciples like, does he really mean anyone? And they would have nodded or given an expression, yes, he actually means anyone. And the disciples knew that he meant anyone because Jesus accepted them to be disciples. To some of us, Jesus' invitation sounds strange. We live in a society that says, look out for number one. Take care of yourself. Don't let anyone hold you back from doing something that you want to do. But to the people that Jesus is speaking to, he was a rabbi. Homeless? Yes. Unconventional? Yes. But a rabbi nonetheless. And a rabbi was a teacher of God's word, which was then just the Old Testament. But rabbis had extensive knowledge of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. And they had all the writings of the prophets. Every Jewish boy grew up with the dream of having a chance to study under one of these rabbis. But very few ever had a chance to do so. Each rabbi had a small group of talmids. It's T-A-L-M-I-D, but it's pronounced Talmid. Each rabbi had a group of talmids, which we've just simplified. We understand the word disciple. That's really what they were. They were disciples or apprentices, but in those days they were called talmids. Essentially, every rabbi had a class of students. This was an incredibly exclusive group of students. The Apostle Paul was a Talmud or a disciple of Gamaliel, who was one of the best-known rabbis in that day. Every Jewish boy dreamed of being a Talmud or a disciple of one of these rabbis, but most of them couldn't make the cut. Some didn't even try because they knew they wouldn't qualify. I don't have the right education. I don't have the right finances. I don't come from the right upbringing. It's not even worth me trying because I know I can't pass the test. Those who didn't make the cut usually ended up taking some kind of trade. Usually they just followed in their father's footsteps. Whatever their father did, they just ended up doing that because they weren't worthy of being a disciple. For those students who wanted to become one of the talmids of a particular rabbi, they had to go through an application process. First, there were hefty prerequisites before even being considered. Before you could even get the application, there were prerequisites. Some of those prerequisites were the equivalent of the GPA and transcript prerequisites that we would now have to get into a major college or university. Let's see what kind of education you've had up to this time. What kind of training do you have? Because we don't want to start at ground zero. We want somebody who's already proven that they have the ability to learn. If you want to go to Harvard, you better have at least a 4.0 GPA. How many have ever applied for Harvard? You better be at least a 4.0. They won't even look at you if you're not at least, but really, they're looking for those that are above 4.0. And some of you say, I thought 4.0 was the highest. No, it's not. There are higher GPAs than the 4.0. You better have at least a 1,600 SAT score. Without those kinds of stats, you probably aren't going to get into Harvard. You better also be able to show you've been involved in extracurricular activities and community service projects. They're looking for the best of the best. They don't want to waste time with those who aren't going to make an effort. The same thing was true of somebody applying to be the disciple of a rabbi. Disciples had to have an impressive knowledge of Scripture. The rabbi would quiz them. If you got through the application process, then you'd sit down for the verbal interview, and he would quiz you to find out how much you already knew. He might ask you to quote an entire chapter, or maybe even an entire book of the Bible. Or he'd ask you questions about some of the prophecies or something to make sure you had a thorough background already of what God taught. It was an intense, painstaking process. But rabbis had to be thorough because the excellence of the student reflected on the excellence of the teacher. If your students grew up to be respected and grew up to be known that they had knowledge and people realized they had interned or studied under you, it made you more important. So they're going to make sure that they get followers or disciples that are going to learn the stuff and make them look better. If a person was lucky enough to be selected to be a Talmud, they would move in with the rabbi that selected them and try to become a clone of that rabbi. I want to learn everything I can about this person. I want to study. I want to be like them. I want to be exactly like my teacher. It was an honor to be considered, and they were honored to give up everything for that rabbi. So even the requirement that Jesus had for them to die to themselves was really not a new concept to them. Every Jewish boy, because girls weren't accepted in those days, every Jewish boy knew, if I am lucky enough to be chosen, I will give up my family, I will give up everything that I've got, and I will follow this rabbi. However, the perks that came along with giving that up were better than what they're giving up, because the rabbi was usually fairly wealthy. He would take care of them. He would feed them. He would buy their clothes at the designer stores. They'd get to go on these fancy trips with their rabbi. So I'm giving stuff up, but I'm really not giving anything up, because look what I gained. And that's kind of what Jesus was telling his people. You got to give it all up to follow me. But some of the things that Jesus was asking them to give up weren't the same. That's where the catch was. Because, see, when you became a student of one of the other rabbis, you became highly respected. You actually gained wealth. You gained prestige. People started looking up to you. And Jesus was saying things like, you've got to give up being number one, and you have to become number last. In my school, the least are the greatest. The greatest becomes the servant. The one who's the greatest is actually the one who has no respect. Rodney Dangerfield, maybe he was a disciple of Jesus. I can't get no respect. Jesus was asking people to give things up, but the things he asked them to give up were different. He was saying, give up your dreams for being great. Because to be great in my school, to be great as one of my followers, you have to become the servant of all. So the concept of giving it all up wasn't totally new. It was just they weren't sure they wanted to give up those things that Jesus asked them to give up. But that's discussion for another week. We're going to focus on the take up your cross to follow at another time. Today we want to focus on anyone. Jesus changed the system. He didn't screen the applicants. He wasn't looking for the most qualified by earthly standards. He even invited common fishermen and tax collectors to be part of his group. There was no application, no test, no competition to prove that you were better than the other applicants. All you had to do was accept the invitation. Once you become a follower, he starts working on the qualifications. He accepts us just the way we are. But then he begins to change us. He begins to work with us to take things out of our life and to put things into our life and to teach us the things we need to know. We come to him just as we are. But he doesn't want to leave us that way. He wants to make us better. Jesus said, anyone can come after me. Watch this real quick video clip.
When Jesus said to Matthew, "Follow me," he was making it clear that his invitation to follow is not just for the religious elite or for the morally upright, for those who have their lives together. His invitation is for all of us who are hiding some stains. Jesus said, anyone who would come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Anyone. Anyone is a pretty inclusive word. Anyone can follow Jesus. Anyone who's ever thought to themselves, I've gone too far, my stain is too big. Anyone who's ever laid awake at night and said, I can't believe what I've done. Anyone who's ever looked in the mirror and said to themselves, I can't believe what I've become. Anyone can follow.
When word got out about a new rabbi who was picking out followers at random, people started to wonder what was going on. They came to hear from this incredible teacher named Jesus. But when they looked at his disciples, they must have been confused. They must have shook their heads and thought, these are his students? They're nobodies. Those two used to be fishermen. That guy there, he used to take my tax money and he cheated me. But then Jesus made the invitation. And when the people heard that anyone could come learn from this incredible rabbi, I'm sure they started to entertain the idea. People who had given up the dream of ever being accepted by a rabbi a long time ago were now wondering if maybe they could be welcomed into this new group. Maybe their dream could finally come true. They could actually be a student of a rabbi. Slowly but surely, people started to come and wanted to follow this Jesus. They began to realize that when he said anyone, he meant anyone. But here's the struggle. Although we never say it, we don't always buy into the idea that church should be for just anyone. We kind of like church the way it is, don't we? We usually prefer things to stay the same. And same soon becomes standard. And pretty soon a standard becomes a qualification. I think Jesus knew how things would go. I think Luke 9:23 reminds us that there shouldn't be any qualifications except the decision, I want to be part of this group. The qualifications come later. We usually don't talk about it, but a lot of us have our own unwritten code. For instance, there's kind of an unwritten dress code, isn't there? Anyone can come to Jesus, but they have to dress a certain way. They had that same rule back in Jesus' day. You got to dress a certain way. Before you can be accepted, you've got to adopt our dress code. Most churches have added all kinds of things over the years to their unwritten code. It started out with 1 or 2 requirements, but the longer time goes and the more people come together to kind of have the same standards, they start putting those standards in, and the list becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger of the qualifications somebody has to meet before they come. Hair length, the color or style of hair. What kind of a social agenda do you have? Because we only allow people in here with a certain social agenda. Sometimes even the amount of education a person has or how much income they make comes into play. We're going after those in a certain income standard. If you don't meet this income standard, you're not welcome here because we want to make sure that you can financially contribute to what we want to do. I was talking to a couple not too long ago that's been here as part of our church now for about a year. And talking to them about their background. And they had tried some other churches. Some of them they tried for several months at a time, but they said they weren't there very long before they found out they weren't ever going to be accepted in these churches. They weren't ever going to fit in because some of these churches were looking at a certain income level and they didn't have that income level. Some of them had a certain dress code, and if you didn't wear a suit and tie on Sunday, or if the women didn't wear a dress, then you're not welcome here in our church. This is what you have to wear to be a part of our group. And they felt very uncomfortable. Well, they've been with us now for almost a year. They said from day one, they walked in and they felt like, this is family. We feel at home here. We can wear what we're comfortable with. They don't care what kind of education we have. They never asked us what we do for a living. Now, sometimes I do ask that question when somebody's going, hey, what do you do? You know, where are you from? Just trying to get to know somebody. But it's not a qualification to be a part of the fellowship here. Jesus said anyone can come. And that's what he wants us to have. But if we really start thinking about, do I have requirements? Some of us have to be honest. You know what? I'm not ready to accept certain people. There are certain things. If somebody came in here and they had a weird hair color, you say, yeah, I'm not sure I could accept them as well as I accept someone else. Or if somebody came in here and they didn't dress a certain way, I'm just not sure. I'm really excited. I'm not going to tell them they can't be here, but, I'm not going to introduce myself to them because they're just not my style of person. Jesus said, anyone. I will accept you just the way you are. The question is, do you want to be a part? However, if you want to be a part, then I want everything. I want you to fully join. I want you to be a part. And I want you to start learning and to start listening and to start growing, because I will take you from here and together we'll move along the path until you finally come to perfection. How many of you have arrived at that perfect state yet? Raise your hand. You've arrived. We're all still on that path, moving towards perfection. The church might say anyone is welcome. But when you look at how the members dress or what their political leanings are, what style of music they accept, it becomes clear that there are some qualifications. You're accepted here as long as you'll listen to my kind of music. If you like a different kind of music, don't bring that in here because I don't approve of that music. Now, lyrics or something, yeah, we're not going to allow some of that stuff in here. But I don't care what style of music you like. You know what? God created music, all styles of music. Your kind of music may not be my style, but I thank God that you can praise him with your style of music. The key is, are we praising God? Are we lifting up the name of Jesus? Jesus didn't just get rid of qualifications. When Jesus said anyone, he did something else. In eliminating the qualifications, he also eliminated all the excuses. Because for years, people had excuses. I can't be a follower of this rabbi. I can't excel. I can't do this because I don't meet the qualifications. Nobody will accept me. And Jesus says, you have no more excuses. It's all on you. I'm telling you, all you do is make a decision to follow. Do you want to follow? I'll take you. But you got to make a decision you're going to follow. Okay, I'm not going to follow you. You're coming to follow me. If you want to follow, come follow. Let's go do this together. No more excuses. Stop making excuses. The only excuse you can have is, I'm not ready to follow. I don't want to be a follower. I want to be the leader. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Well, if you don't want anybody telling you what to do, you shouldn't become a follower of Jesus. Because Jesus does have things he wants you to do. He wants to teach you. He wants you to learn from him. The tradesman that had very theological training no longer had an excuse not to follow a rabbi. The dropout student could no longer say, I'm not smart enough to be included. The single mother of 4, that all of her children came from a different father, could no longer say, well, I can't be accepted because I didn't do things the proper way. Jesus, you know what? That's in the past. Let's look at your future. Do you want to follow me? I don't care where you've been. Let's start now and make a better future. One of the things we talked about last week were the multitudes of people that followed Jesus just for the entertainment or the show that he put on everywhere he went. They either weren't interested in a real relationship or they didn't think they qualified to be a full-fledged disciple. Jesus cut through all their excuses and simply gave an invitation. He said, anyone can be my disciple. The only thing holding you back is you. You can keep hanging around the fringes, wishing you could have the same kind of relationship that others do, or that others seem to have, or you can just make the decision. You can just do it. Because sometimes you look at somebody else and say, I wish I could be as close to God as they are. I wish God loved me as much as he loves them. You know what? He already loves you as much as he loves them. And you're saying, I wish I could have that. You can have that. Jesus gives the invitation. The only thing holding you back from having the kind of relationship with Jesus you want is you. In fact, let me put it this way. You already have the kind of relationship with Jesus you want. If you wanted more, you could have more. Jesus says, I've got the same thing for anybody. What I have for the pastors is the same thing I have for you. You know what? Each one of us could have the same relationship with Jesus that Billy Graham had. Billy Graham had to invest into that relationship. He put a lot of time and effort into establishing that kind of relationship. The only thing holding you back from having a relationship with Jesus is you. A lot of people hold back because they're too busy. I'd really love to be a follower of Jesus. I'd really love to be a disciple, but I'm just too busy. I don't have the time. Well, let me ask you, who's in charge? You or your schedule? See, you can let your schedule run you, or you can run your schedule. You're the one that decides how busy you're going to be. If you need more time for Jesus, eliminate some other stuff. You're making the decision what you're going to spend your time with. If we get brutally honest with ourselves and really look at how we spend our time, a lot of the stuff we do really isn't as important as we like to think it is. We think it's important, but it's really not. If it's holding us back from getting what we want out of our relationship with Jesus, it's time to get rid of it. We're in charge of our schedule. We make time for the things that are really important to us. Only you can decide what your priorities are. Other people say, well, I'd really like to have that kind of relationship, but if you knew my past, you'd understand I can never have that kind of relationship. I mean, Billy Graham, he had a good childhood. I didn't have a good childhood. There were years of my teenage years that I'm not proud of. I did a lot of things that I know Jesus wouldn't accept me. I couldn't have that kind of relationship. I can't forgive myself for my addiction. I can't forgive myself of that divorce. I can't forgive myself of that bankruptcy because I made some mistakes and I squandered some of my money. It's easy to hide behind excuses. Because who's going to argue with someone who's been through a tragedy or someone who's been emotionally scarred? But Jesus got rid of all those excuses when he said, anyone. It doesn't matter. Anyone can be my disciple. We're a lot more hung up on our past than Jesus is. Jesus doesn't care where you've been. The past is the past. I love that clip from The Lion King when Rafiki the monkey comes and hits them in the head. And Simba says, hey, what's that for? And Rafiki says, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. The past can be painful, but it's the past. Don't let the past hold you back. Move to the future. What Jesus cares about is your future. And your future starts right now. Now, you could wait and have your future start tomorrow, or you could wait and have your future start next week. But actually, your future starts right now. Your future can be the same as your past because you haven't changed it. Or you can say, you know what? The past stops. I'm starting a new day. It's a brand new day. And I give him praise. It's a brand new day. And me and Jesus, we're going to move on. We're going to create a better future. Your future starts right now. Anyone is welcome to follow Jesus. Anyone is invited to be one of his disciples. Anyone. Sexual past? Anyone. Ex-con? Anyone. Inmate? Anyone. Recently divorced? Anyone. Legalist? Anyone. Alcoholic? Anyone. Pothead? We have to have that one now in Washington. Anyone. Addict? Anyone. Hypocrite? Anyone. Anyone. Jesus says anyone can follow me. Anyone can be my disciple. That includes you. But it also includes your next door neighbor, your boss, your teacher. Somebody's saying, I'm not sure I want my next door neighbor in heaven. I'm not sure I want my next door neighbor in my church. I mean, I'm okay with them going somewhere else, but I'm not sure I want them. I live next door to them. I'm not sure I want them sitting next to me on Sunday morning. Somebody's saying, my boss doesn't deserve Jesus. Anyone includes everyone. Jesus extends the invitation to come. Are we ready and willing to extend the invitation for people to come? Are we willing to accept the invitation to come and be a disciple? Are we ready for what can happen when we embrace the invitation to anyone? Because if anyone can come to our church, it's going to kind of mess things up, isn't it? Things aren't going to look the same. There's going to be some people that look a little different and act a little different and maybe don't know how to talk. There might be a few words said that we're not used to having said in church. It might mess things up a little bit. It won't be this perfect little place that we've created. If we really accept anyone, there's going to be people here that don't know the rules. They might cause a disruption in service. Their baby might cry. And they might not have been taught that when the baby's causing disruption, you need to take them out. So we may need to deal with that gracefully. That it's okay, we love you here, we love having your baby here, but the baby is being a disruption. We've got a place for you to sit out in the lobby where you can hear. Let's take the baby to the nursery where it can be cared for. We're glad you're here. We're glad the baby's here. But we may have to have some of those awkward conversations with someone. If we really accept anyone, we'll be forced to get out of our comfort zones. We'll be forced to rub shoulders with people from different backgrounds, different social circles, people who have different music collections, people who do different things for recreation than what we do, people whose wardrobes confuse or annoy us. I put the confuse in there because there's sometimes it's like, okay. I don't call that clothes, but your body's covered, fine. It means we might have some people here that are hard to tolerate and even harder to love. Jesus broke down the barriers. He invited people that didn't yet know the rules and even completely ignored the man-made rules and traditions that didn't really matter anyway. The true followers, the true disciples of Jesus are willing to open their arms and open their hearts like Jesus did. Now, a few of you might be thinking, wait a minute, we can't just let anyone come to our church. We can't just let anyone show up and invite them into God's family and tolerate anything they want. That's not biblical. And you're partially right. That's not biblical. I'm not saying we tolerate or condone sin. I'm not saying we let people come in their sin and say, that's okay. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. Jesus is okay with it. We're just happy you're in our church. Because Jesus wants to take us from where we're at and move us forward. But we have to be willing to let them come in with that baggage. And let God to work with them in his timing. It may take a while for some of them to let go of some of those things. Let me ask, how many of you have gotten rid of all the baggage that you brought with you? How many of you have picked up a little baggage that you didn't have when you first came to Christ? Yeah, people will come in with that stuff, and we don't tell them it's okay. We say, you know what? You need to pray about it. Let God deal with you on that issue. You need to let God help you set those things down. But we've got to understand they will have some of that baggage when they come. And that baggage might mess things up. When Jesus makes the invitation, he says, anyone. So some of the people that respond to the invitation will have a past that we won't approve of. Some of them will have been involved in lifestyles that we're embarrassed to even hear about. Please don't tell me about your past. I don't even want to hear about it. I feel dirty just hearing about those things. Fans don't know how to handle people like that. We're talking not a fan. Are we fans or are we disciples of Jesus? Fans don't know how to handle people like that. They prefer not to know. Fans prefer things to be shallow and comfortable. But followers are willing to listen. They're willing to hear stories. Tell me your story. Because the more we know about somebody, the more we're able to help them to overcome those things. Fans are willing to hear stories of brokenness and sin and still welcome those people with open arms. Jesus accepts everyone just the way they are, but once they come to him, he begins to transform them. Transformation is a process. It takes time. And most of us, in fact, all of us, should still be transforming. We should still be changing. Which brings it to the last point for today. This point is crucial for all of us, both the brand new Christians and those who have been in the faith for a while. Because Jesus makes it clear that when you choose to follow him, you must be willing to give up everything. You come the way you are, but you must be willing. If you come to Jesus and say, okay, Jesus, I want to come to you, but there is no way I'm giving that up. Jesus, I'll come to you, but don't ask me to give. If you're not willing to give up everything, Jesus won't ask all of us to give up certain things. To my knowledge, there's only one time in the Bible Jesus told somebody to sell everything they have and give it all away. Because he knew what was holding that man back. He said, unless you're willing to give that up, you can't be my follower. You need to be willing to give it all up. So if you want to follow Jesus, you can come, but you need to be willing to give up everything. When a Talmud was accepted into a rabbi school, they would leave their homes, their jobs, whatever was holding them back. They would go and follow the rabbi. They would follow the rabbi wherever he went. So if the rabbi went to the market, they went to the market. this little piggy went to the market. His students would follow him. If a rabbi decided to go to another town, his students would follow. If the rabbi needed to visit somebody in the sick area, his students would follow. But now, if he decided to follow a rabbi named Jesus, it was even worse, because Jesus didn't have a home. He didn't have a place to lay his head. Now, I'm not saying Jesus saying you need to sell your house and be homeless. But in those days, to follow Jesus, you had to be homeless. You slept on the streets, under the trees. If your rabbi decided to eat dinner with sinful people, guess what you did? You ate dinner with sinful people. Those aren't people you would choose on your own to associate with, but your rabbi is eating with them. And to be his student, you do what he does. So all of a sudden, you're forced to be exposed to people that you don't want to be exposed to, because you're following your rabbi. If Jesus the rabbi decided not to flee from persecution, his students would follow. And that's the kind of relationship that Jesus offers to us. The greatest teacher who ever lived offers you the chance to become one of his students. And when he says anyone, he means anyone. You can just keep coming for the show. You can keep coming for the fellowship. Nothing wrong with the fellowship. But Jesus says, I want more. Last week we talked about defining the relationship. Jesus says, I want more out of this relationship. I want to be the Lord. I want you to be my servant. I want to be the master. I want you to be my apprentice. I want to be the teacher. I want you to be my student. Let's define the relationship. What do you want? Do you want what Jesus wants? Are you really willing to let him be in charge? Are you willing to lay it all down and learn from Jesus? When he says anyone, he means everyone. With no qualifications, there are no excuses. The only thing holding you back is you. But even though he makes his invitation to anyone, he also guarantees us that if you take the invitation, it's going to cost you everything. Are you ready? Are you ready to become a true follower of Jesus Christ?